In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the early pre-sale prices for Duskmourn, looking at where things are currently a couple weeks before the set officially releases, so that we can do a couple follow-ups and sort of track the price trajectories before the set comes out. So let's jump into the video. Everybody, thank you so much for being here again. Second video today, not a usual thing, but I wanted to talk about this, and I think it's important to kind of get the data out there. So if you guys do enjoy the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Click the bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos are posted, and we're going to get right into it. So a couple things to note very quickly before we actually start here. These are, of course, pre-sale prices, and I've said this before, TCG players' pre-sale prices are often astronomically high. The way it's, set up is that only a limited number of stores are able to list pre-sales, so there's really not much of a demand to drive things down, and so your best bet is often to shop around and wait. However, we have seen in the past where pre-sales do end up going up in value before it even comes out. Modern Horizons 3 had multiple cards like this. Bloomburrow had a couple cards like this. So what I thought would be interesting to do is to take a look at where things are at right now pre-sale wise, see what's selling the best, what's high, what are we looking for out of the set. Then next week, when the set actually releases, we'll do a follow-up and see where they're at. So a lot of people are going to be getting their hands on this product this weekend with pre-releases, and also just being able to buy them. I know I'll be doing a video opening up some packs on the channel probably on Friday, so stay tuned for that if you want to see some actual rips happening. But it's not officially released everywhere until the 27th, so just, some food for thought in terms of values being probably much higher now for the majority of things than they will be. But it's also really interesting to look at that because, like I said, sometimes things do end up taking a trajectory in the other direction. Now, the biggest value card out of this set at the moment is, of course, going to be Valgavoth, the, I forget what it's called, Terror Eater? Yeah. So this is the showcase textured version, which is exclusive to collector boosters, and this card right now, pre-selling around 227, but again, just to emphasize the point I was making about how quickly those prices can drop, this was at 350 with no sales, and then it started to drop a little bit, and there haven't been too many. You're already seeing it down over $100 from the initial price that people were putting it up for, and that's why pre-sales are just such a... It's such a game, if you will, and it's like, just wait, you're better off waiting, especially this early on, but it does give you a good idea of what people are going to be looking for in the set more than anything else. And we obviously know that the fractured foils, the Japanese showcase foils, these are going to command some value. Some of the cards are really good, like Overlord of the Hauntwoods, so obviously those are going to be, more highly demanded. But we also don't know what the ratios are going to be like on pulling these. I know some YouTubers and stuff and people on whatnot have been opening some boxes, but I don't think we've seen enough open yet to have a really good sample size of how often these will be pulling up. With Bloomburrow, the raised foils were extremely scarce. They did not come often at all, and I presume that it'll be similar here for the fractured foil, and I think that the textured foil, which are these black and red ones here, will more than likely be rare, but not as rare, obviously, as the fractured foil. So just, some food for thought there in terms of the top end of the set. But that's kind of obvious, right? These rare, more scarce cards are going to be more expensive. So I thought that, another place to look would be to take a look at the best selling. And one of the top selling pre-selling card right now in the set is Leyline of Resonance. And this card was actually up at like 15 and now has dropped pre-sale wise to already to $5. So again, massive drops. It'll probably end up dropping another $1 or $2. But this card's really good. We talked about it in a video before, but whenever you cast an instant or sorcerer spell, you copy that spell as long as it targets only a single creature. This is going to be a really strong card in Standard above anything else. Mono Red is a really powerful deck there, and there are so many good targets for a card like this. I see this as a card, and I want to, kind of notate this before we get into it next week. I see this as a card that will more than likely dip out another $1 or $2, and then people might start to scoop it up. It could very well end up being over $10 before the set actually releases, just based on trends and how much people are actually going in on this. But it really, again, depends on so many other factors. We look at a card like Meathook Massacre 2, which I think is a really cool card. It's obviously nowhere near as good as the original Meathook Massacre. I think that's kind of obvious, but what it does have going for it is that it's got some other effects that make it pretty strong, and this is around $22 right now on pre-sale. There's no way I think it stays that high. It's probably gonna fall another $10, honestly, by the time the set actually drops. Whether or not it moves back up from there, or, you know, premium versions of it go up and stuff like that, is definitely a conversation that can be had, because it's a very real possibility. But early on, I think, you know, you're going to see that trend moving downwards. In my personal opinion, one of the best cards in this set is Overlord of the Hauntwoods. I talked about this card when it was released a couple months ago for previews. It's just extremely good, not only when it comes out, but generally when it attacks. You're getting a colorless land that is every basic land type. There's obvious, like, domain synergy and stuff like that. Such a cool card and a really cool design. That impending cost does allow you to cast it for less. And it obviously still enters, but then you can't utilize the other effects for a couple turns because you got to take the time counters off. Overall, though, I see this card down at $14, give or take, with the limited number of pre-sales that we have available. I expect this card to do well. I just don't know where that's going to fall. This seems to be one of the cards people are really putting their money into, though. And if it does get to a point where it's under $10, you could see some people looking at it and saying, well, it's that cheap, I might as well pick one up. The thing that works, obviously, for a card like Overlord of the Hauntwoods, and I'm pretty sure, as I look at this live recording here, it does have a few different variants, so that is also important to note. Obviously, some people may want to go after the showcase, which is beautiful for the record, but it's also got an extended art, so there's going to be some variants, I think, in terms of, you know, which copies people are going after. You might just have people that don't like the Japanese showcase art on these. I think some of them look really cool, and some I could maybe, I don't like them as much. But Overlord of the Hauntwoods is definitely the best performing of the Overlords up to this point. They are all mythics, and honestly, they are all relatively cheap, but I think kind of where they belong in terms of their regular versions. I think a lot of the Japanese showcase versions will be very interesting to watch over time, especially because there's just, you know, the fractured foil, the regular ones, the Japanese ones. It's going to be a very interesting trend, but I think this is a pretty good card to keep an eye on. Marvin Murderous Mimic is another card that we talked about at length. It's a really, really good card. People are super excited about it, and there's a ton of combo potential. It's about $8, give or take. I also feel like this could be a card that goes back up before it comes out. It's going to be, I don't know, let's assume it drops another couple bucks, and then someone finds a combo that breaks it, especially with... Well, this feels like more of a commander card personally to me than it does a standard card, but that's just off of like the initial riff. With streamers having access to play Duskmourn on Arena starting early, I think it's either this weekend or early next week, a lot more cards are going to be seeing play, and people are going to be figuring out combos, and it only takes one combo, like we saw with Raal Monsoon Mage in Modern Horizons, to just take the whole thing and flip it on its head, and then you get people starting to scatter after these pre-orders. Enduring Tenacity, another one that's selling really well, and obviously this is a card that does have some serious combo potential in the life gain, life burn decks. It's just another version of, like, is it Exquisite Blood or Sanguine Bond? I can never remember which one it is. I probably should have looked at that a little bit more in detail, but Exquisite Blood, whenever your opponent loses life, you gain that much life. This is the opposite, so you gain life, opponent loses life. Still, with Exquisite Bond and anything that's going to trigger a life gain, it's an extremely easy OTK, not to mention the fact that if it dies, it comes back, still an enchantment, so it's a lot harder to get rid of. Just a popular card and a playable card, which I think is kind of one of the things it has going for it. A couple other notes here on this Duskmourn stuff in terms of like early pre-sales and what's moving most. These lands are beautiful, for one, and two, they are just substantially better than the tainted lands that like don't have the ability to add any colored mana at all. It's like add a colorless or add one of these if you control a swamp. These are really good, and they look incredible. I just think the art on these is top tier. I think, you know, we saw similar trends with the Murders at Karlov Manor Surveil lands that, like, arguably, because they come in tapped, aren't even the best lands you have access to, but they've gone up significantly because there's demand for them, and they're fetchable, so it has that going for it. But all of these lands that are in this set, I think, are really, really good, and I could see them going up. I could see them selling out quite a bit. These, I do think the borderless foil versions of these lands will end up doing really well for themselves over time, but whether or not they go up before the set releases, that's hard to say, but it's always good for a set when there is a cycle of lands in it that's playable, because it does help the set's value over time. We've got Kato here at 14, which is, you know, not bad. It's a decent card. I don't think it's crazy good or anything, but I do like it. Valgavoth is an interesting one that's selling quite a lot. He does have a lot of different variants. We obviously looked at his textured foil variant. I do think the card's really good. I do think it's also kind of a win more card, though, unless you have ways to cheat it out. So I don't know how high of a price this card's really going to command, especially when it started out at like 50 and even at a couple sold listings and is now as low as 20. It's going to be popular. There will absolutely be decks that can play it as a win condition and can find ways to get it out, but I don't think it's going to be splashed across everything that plays black or anything like that. So I could see it falling you know, pretty significantly, especially when it has to compete with all its other variants, which will definitely, you know, factor into the price of this overall. But right now there's you know, not a lot of listings for anything yet. I think this weekend we'll see a lot of that ramp up, and then I think it's going to be kind of watching from there to see what starts to trend in that other direction. As I said before, there's always those one or two cards that, you know, bypass everyone's radar early on, and then it turns out that that card's the demand. Wow, this is only $4, and then a bunch of people buy it out, and that's just what the nature of it. That can happen with these pre-sale buyouts. I think Demonic Council is an absolutely insane card, and I'm genuinely shocked that this is only like 6 and change. I mean, another card we did a whole video about, talking about, you know, search your library for a demon, but if your Delirium's active, you search any card. It's basically a Demonic Tutor that's not that hard to set up, you know? Is it as good as Demonic Tutor? Obviously not, but can it do a lot of similar things? Yeah, it sure can. And in Standard, you could play this at 4 if you're playing a demon-based deck. Just another, it also could search Grizzlebrand in other formats, just a fun note. And again, it's really cheap right now, in my opinion, at $6.99. I think, you know, I won't be buying anything until release day for this in terms of pre-orders or anything. I usually do like to wait, but I've said before, the best time to buy is release day, because you do have that point where stuff dips and then everyone starts to look and say, well, this is super cheap, I'm going to grab it. And there's only so long you can stay super cheap until it starts disappearing off the market. And this is kind of a tried and true method that we've seen happen now, at least over the past couple of years with products. And I see no reason to think it's not going to continue here. So this video is more about laying the groundwork for part 2, which will be like looking at the set on release and kind of seeing where things go. But I did think it was interesting and kind of worth establishing that before we actually talk about it, because see like where they're starting. So then people can go back and say, well, yeah, look, I saw the pre-sale prices on these. They were crazy high. They dropped. And now, you know, what could you have gotten them at? So it's just good for historical data purposes, I think, to compare the two. But let me know what you guys think. Is there anything here that feels undervalued to you at this point with pre-sales? Are there things you have your eyes on? And just in general, like, what are you hoping to get out of the set? Because like I said, people will be opening their pre-releases and stuff this week. So there will be probably more being added to the market when stores get their shipments in. But again, you're not going to see like your average Joe or me or anybody else being able to list stuff on TCG Player until the official pre-release thing is lifted. So who knows? It's going to be fun to see what happens. I think it's a cool set. I do think it definitely, maybe a step below Bloomburrow for me personally in terms of the actual cards, but I think there's definitely some really powerful stuff in here, and it should be fun to see how it all shapes out. Let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.